You're listening to the audio production of Haven of Swans by Colleen Coble, published by Thomas Nelson, and read by Devon O'Day.
To my parents, George and Peggy Rhodes, your faith in me has never wavered. Prologue. Night crept over the hills, smothering the landscape in a cocoon of darkness that would hide him in a few minutes. He had abandoned his real name for one more fitting of his strength and intellect. Gideon was what he called himself when clouds hid the moon and the shadows gathered. Gideon, the destroyer of evil. Before the moonlight could fade completely, he flipped down the sun visor and stared into the face of his wife Miranda, a photo of her as she had once been, as she would be again. The blare of a horn startled him, and he slapped the visor back into place as a gray SUV careened past where his car sat on the narrow shoulder. The vehicle splashed water from a mud puddle over his car. He bit back an expletive, knowing such words ill befit a man of his intellect. He twisted the key and heard the car engine purr to life. Easing onto the road, he hunched over the wheel and stared into the fog. The turnoff to the lake was just ahead. No car lights illuminated the road ahead or behind. He turned the vehicle onto the muddy track and rolled down the window to let in the fresh scent of the water. The lane was meant for tractors, and visitors rarely trespassed. The owners would never even know he'd been here. The lake reflected the golden orb of the moon. He parked and turned off the car. The cacophony of crickets and tree frogs paused, then started up again as he stepped into the mud and went around to the trunk. The lid sprang open at his touch, and he looked down into the woman's face. As with the others, preludes to the grand finale, he'd stripped her of beauty. This one would never lash a man with her tongue again. Securing the gray wool blanket around the body, he hauled it out and dumped it on the ground. He tucked a partial peanut butter sandwich under the sinner's blouse. He took hold of the end of the blanket and pulled the bundle down to the water. Reaching the small pier, he paused and listened, then stepped onto the rickety boards. The body slid easily across the worn wood. Once he reached the end of the dock, he dropped the end of the blanket and settled onto the weather-scoured boards to wait. He pulled his GPS from his pocket and noted the coordinates. Close enough. He didn't plan to go far from shore. A hint of pine mingled on the night air with the scent of water. The chilly night began to creep into his bones. Loons called, and he straightened and stood to stamp his feet. Then the angels came. Gideon held his...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?